March 29, 1945. Cottbus Airfield, Eastern Germany. The aircraft sat alone on a cratered runway, its engines still ticking as it cooled. American ground crews stood 15 feet back, afraid to approach. The WWII 152H-1 was unlike anything they had seen before. Its wings stretched impossibly long, its fuselage sleek and predatory. The cockpit canopy was streaked with oil and condensation, but through the glass they could see him, Oberleutnant Josef Keil. Still strapped in, still breathing. His oxygen mask hung loose around his neck. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. A medic finally climbed onto the wing. Keil's hands were locked on the control stick, fingers white with pressure. When the medic touched his shoulder, Keil flinched violently, gasping as if surfacing from deep water. His first words were in English, learned from captured Allied pilots. 14,000 meters. I saw them. I saw everything. The Ta-152H-1 was Germany's final answer to Allied air superiority. Designed by Kurt Tank, it was an evolution of the Focke-Wulf FW-190, stretched and refined for extreme high-altitude interception. Its Junkers Jumo 213E engine, a liquid-cooled inverted V-12 producing 1,750 horsepower, was paired with an MW-50 methanol water injection system that could push it to 2,050 horsepower in short bursts. At 48,000 feet, it could outfly any Allied fighter. At that altitude, the air was so thin, the skies so black, pilots reported feeling like they were already in space. Only 43 Ta-152s were ever completed. Most were destroyed on the ground by Allied bombing. A handful made it into combat. Keil's aircraft, White 24, was one of 6 assigned to JG-301 in the final weeks of the war. Captain Robert Shaw of the 359th Fighter Group examined the aircraft as Keil was led away. The wings were nearly 48 feet across, disproportionately long, designed to generate lift in thin air. The fuselage was cramped, every inch optimized for performance. Shaw ran his hand along the engine cowling. It was still hot. The metal smelled of burnt oil and high-octane fuel. Inside the cockpit, he found Keil's logbook. The last entry was dated that morning. Mission: Intercept High-Altitude Reconnaissance. Ceiling: 13,800 meters. Result: Contact made. No weapons fired. Return to base immediate. Shaw flipped back through earlier entries. Keil had flown the Ta-152 17 times in 3 weeks. Every flight reached altitudes above 12,000 meters. Every entry ended the same way. No engagement, observation only. That night in a commandeered farmhouse, Keil was questioned. His English was better than expected. His answers disturbingly precise. He sat with his hands folded, a mug of coffee untouched in front of him. A recording device captured every word. The aircraft performs beyond specification at altitude. The Jumo 213 remains stable even with oxygen poor air. The MW-50 system provides adequate emergency power. Control surfaces respond well despite thin atmosphere. Shaw leaned forward. You said you saw them. Saw what? Keil's expression didn't change. Your bombers, B-17s, flying at 8,000 meters. From my altitude, they looked like toys. I could see entire formations. I counted 64 aircraft. I watched their contrails spread across Germany like scars. Why didn't you attack? No ammunition. Shaw glanced at the interpreter, who shrugged. They had already inspected the TA-152. Its guns were loaded. 4 20mm MG-151 cannons, fully armed. Your aircraft had ammunition, Lieutenant. We checked. Keil looked up then, and Shaw saw something in his eyes that made his skin crawl. Not fear, not exhaustion, something closer to reverence. I didn't say I had no ammunition. I said I couldn't attack. At that altitude, Lieutenant Captain, you understand things differently. The air is so thin, you can see the curvature of the earth. You can see weather systems forming hundreds of kilometers away. You can see the war from above, and it looks small. The room went silent. The recording device continued its soft mechanical hiss. I watched your bombers destroy Dresden. I watched them burn Hamburg. I watched contrails over Berlin. From 14,000 meters, I could see it all happening at once. Past and present, cause and effect. And I understood that shooting down one bomber, 10 bombers, would change nothing. The war was already over. We just hadn't landed yet. Shaw felt a chill run through him. You're saying you let them go? I'm saying, at that altitude, you see what matters and what doesn't. The interrogation ended at 0200 hours. Keil was taken to a holding cell. Shaw remained in the farmhouse, reviewing the logbook by candlelight. He noticed something he'd missed before. In the margins of each entry, Keil had sketched the view from altitude. Clouds, horizons, the curve of the earth. On the final page, dated March 29, there was a drawing of a formation of bombers, and above them, alone in an empty sky, a single TA-152. The caption read, Der letzte Jäger, the last hunter. Shaw returned to the airfield at dawn. The TA-152 sat where they'd left it, surrounded by guards. He climbed into the cockpit. The seat was still adjusted to Keil's position, the instruments still showing the last flight's readings. Altitude, 13,800 meters. Airspeed, 760 kilometers per hour. Fuel, 12 liters remaining. He found something wedged by the control stick. A photograph. It showed a woman and 2 children standing in front of a farmhouse. The back was inscribed, Munich, 1940. Shaw was about to climb down when he noticed the oxygen system. The gauge showed empty. Completely empty. Keil had flown at 48,000 feet without oxygen for over an hour. At that altitude, without oxygen, a man would lose consciousness in seconds. Brain damage would occur within minutes. Death would follow shortly after. But Keil had landed the aircraft perfectly, had spoken coherently, had remembered everything. Shaw looked up through the canopy at the morning sky. Somewhere up there, in the thin air where the sky turned black, something had happened to Josef Keil. Something that couldn't be explained by altitude or oxygen deprivation or the stress of combat. He climbed down from the cockpit and walked to the holding cell. The guards let him through. Keil was awake, sitting on a cot, staring at the wall. How did you survive without oxygen? He didn't look at him. Who said I survived?
April 3, 1945, Wright Field, Ohio. The TA-152 arrived in pieces, packed in crates marked with Operation Lusty documentation. Wright Field was the center of Allied technical intelligence, where captured German aircraft were analyzed and tested. The TA-152H-1 White 24 was given priority status. Engineers swarmed over it, photographing every rivet, measuring every dimension, testing every system. Colonel Harold Watson supervised the reconstruction. He had flown captured German fighters before, FW-190s, BF-109s, even a Messerschmitt Me-262 jet. But the Ta-152 unsettled him in ways he couldn't articulate. It wasn't just the performance specifications, though those were extraordinary. It was the feeling he got standing next to it, like the aircraft was waiting for something. The Junkers Jumo 213E engine was removed and tested separately. Dynamometer readings confirmed the specifications: 1,750 horsepower standard, 2,050 with MW50 boost. But the fuel system showed anomalies. Residue in the injection system didn't match standard German methanol water mixture. Chemical analysis revealed traces of compounds that shouldn't exist in aircraft fuel. Organic compounds, biological markers. Watson ordered the oxygen system examined. The tanks were empty, as reported, but the regulators showed unusual wear, as if they'd been operating under extreme pressure. Microscopic analysis of the internal surfaces revealed crystalline formations. Ice, perhaps, but ice that formed at temperatures far below what should be possible at operational altitude. Josef Keil had been transferred to a POW facility in England, then to the United States for further interrogation. Watson reviewed the transcripts. Keil's testimony was consistent, but increasingly strange. He described sensations during high-altitude flight that couldn't be explained physiologically. Time dilation, sensory expansion, an awareness of events occurring beyond visual range. A psychologist's note was clipped to the file. Subject displays no signs of delusional thinking or psychosis. Cognitive function normal. But subject insists that consciousness operates differently above 14,000 meters. Suggests that extreme altitude induces altered perceptual state. Recommends neurological evaluation. Watson decided to fly the Ta-152 himself. The aircraft was reassembled and cleared for test flight. Ground crews installed American radio equipment and safety systems. Watson spent 2 days familiarizing himself with the cockpit layout, the control responses, the engine management systems. On April 15, 1945, he took off from Wright Field at 0630 hours. The Jumo 213E roared to life smoothly, its liquid cooling system maintaining perfect temperature. Watson climbed steadily, pushing through 10,000 feet, then 20,000 feet. The supercharger kicked in with a reassuring whine. 30,000 feet. The sky darkened from blue to deep indigo. At 40,000 feet, Watson felt it begin. A lightness in his chest, a clarity in his vision. The instruments seemed sharper, easier to read. The horizon stretched impossibly far. He could see the curvature of the earth, just as Keil had described. He pushed higher, 45,000 feet. The Ta-152 responded eagerly, its long wings generating lift that shouldn't be possible in such thin air. Watson's breathing was steady, the oxygen system functioning normally. But something else was happening. He could hear his heartbeat, slow and rhythmic, each pulse distinct and separate. Time felt elastic, stretched. At 48,000 feet, he leveled off. The sky above was almost black. Stars were visible despite the morning sun. Below, the Ohio landscape spread like a map, rivers and roads visible for hundreds of miles. Watson felt a profound calm settle over him. Fear evaporated. Doubt disappeared. He understood with absolute certainty that he was seeing the world as it actually was, not filtered through adrenaline or emotion or urgency. Just pure observation. The radio crackled. "Colonel Watson, this is Wright Tower. Please acknowledge." Watson reached for the transmit button. His hand moved slowly, as if through water. He watched it complete the motion, fascinated by the mechanics of his own movement. "Wright Tower, this is Watson. Altitude 48,000 feet. All systems normal." Colonel, you've been at altitude for 23 minutes. Oxygen reserves are at minimum. Recommend descent. Watson checked his oxygen gauge. It showed less than 5 minutes remaining. But he felt fine, better than fine. He felt like he could stay up here forever. Understood, Tower. Beginning descent. But he didn't descend. He rolled the TA-152 into a gentle turn, banking over eastern Ohio. From this height, he could see Lake Erie, a vast expanse of blue against green land. He could see the industrial haze over Cleveland, the farmland stretching to the horizon, the shadows of clouds moving across the earth like living things. The radio came again, more urgent. Colonel Watson, oxygen critical. Descend immediately. Watson looked at the oxygen gauge. It showed 0. The system was empty. He was breathing vacuum-thin air at 48,000 feet with no supplemental oxygen, and he felt perfectly clear. He thought of Keil, of the photograph, of the last entry in the logbook, the last hunter. Watson pushed the stick forward and dove. The TA-152 fell like a raptor, its long wings cutting through stratified air layers. 10,000 feet, 20,000 feet, 30,000 feet. The sky shifted from black to indigo to blue. Sound returned gradually. The engines roar, the wind over the canopy, the radio static. He landed at Wright Field at 08:47 hours. Ground crews rushed to the aircraft, expecting to find him unconscious or worse. Instead, Watson climbed down calmly, removed his flight helmet, and walked to the debriefing room without assistance. The flight surgeon examined him. Blood oxygen levels were normal, heart rate normal, neurological responses normal. The doctor shook his head, baffled. "Colonel, you flew without oxygen for at least 15 minutes at extreme altitude. You should be dead." Watson sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "Get Keil. I need to talk to him." Keil arrived under guard 2 days later. They met in a secure conference room at Wright Field. No recording devices, no observers, just 2 pilots who had flown higher than men were meant to fly. Watson slid the photograph across the table. "Your family?" Keil picked it up gently. "My sister. Her children. The farm was destroyed in 1943. They were evacuated east. I don't know where they are now." "Why did you keep flying, if you knew the war was over?" Keil set the photograph down. "Because someone had to witness it. From up there, you can see the whole pattern. Every bombing raid, every battle, every burned city. It's all visible at once, past and present. I thought if I could see it clearly enough, I could understand why any of it happened." "Did you?" "No. But I saw something else. At that altitude, the war looks temporary, like weather passing. The earth remains, life remains, even after everything we've done to it." Watson leaned back. "How did we survive without oxygen?" Keil smiled for the first time. "We didn't. Not the way we were before. Something changes up there. Your body, your mind, they adapt to thin air in ways that shouldn't be possible. Or maybe the altitude strips away everything unnecessary, and what's left is stronger than you thought." The TA-152H1 White 24 was eventually transferred to the National Air and Space Museum. It sits there still, suspended from cables, its long wings stretched in permanent flight. Visitors walk beneath it, reading placards about its specifications, its performance, its place in history. None of the placards mention Josef Keil. None of them mention Harold Watson's test flight. The oxygen system anomalies were classified. The chemical analysis was lost. The psychological evaluations were buried in archives. But pilots know. Fighter pilots who have pushed their aircraft to the edge of atmosphere, who have felt the sky turn black above them, who have looked down and seen the earth curve away into infinite distance. They know there's something up there.
In the thin air, where breath becomes impossible and consciousness should fail, something that changes you, something that shows you the truth. The Ta-152 was Germany's superfighter, designed to dominate the high-altitude battlefield. But it became something else, a vehicle for transcendence, a machine that carried men beyond the limits of flesh and fear, into a realm where war itself became visible as what it truly was, a temporary madness passing like weather. Kurt Tank survived the war. He emigrated to Argentina, continued designing aircraft, and died in 1983. He never spoke publicly about the Ta-152's psychological effects on pilots. Josef Keil was released from POW status in 1946. He returned to Munich, found his sister's family alive in a refugee camp, and never flew again. He died in 1989. His logbook and the photograph are kept at the Deutsches Museum. Harold Watson flew test missions until 1952, then retired from the Air Force. He gave one interview in 1978 for an obscure aviation journal. The interviewer asked if he'd ever been frightened during a test flight. Watson thought for a long time before answering. Only once, when I realized I didn't want to come down. The last Ta-152 flight at Wright Field occurred on April 15, 1945. After Watson's landing, the aircraft was grounded permanently. Too dangerous, the engineers said. Too unpredictable. But those who worked on it knew the truth. The Ta-152 didn't stop flying because it was dangerous. It stopped flying because it showed men something they weren't ready to see.